life cycle. Today morning, I'm glad to welcome on stage our first keynote speaker, Mr. Peter Johnson, co-founder and co-managing director, Developing World Markets. We look forward to learning today from his rich experience of more than 3 decades, focused on building an investment thesis that emphasizes a robust and market-aligned impact measurement and reporting process. Peter, a warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining us today morning. Very happy to have you here.
Thanks very much. This is a pleasure. Good morning. It's true what they say in Bombay about Delhi, huh? Well, actually, I shouldn't enter into that discussion. I'm not from here, but that's just what people tell me. I do want to start by asking for a show of hands. How many of you started your journey in impact in this decade? Let's say from 2020 onwards. Okay. How many in the previous decade, the 2010s? Okay. How many in the early 2000s? And anybody, I think there will be some, who started in the 1990s. I do know at least one person in the room. I talked with them outside. Someone I've known for 20 years. Okay. This is very interesting. The most important thing is almost everybody raised their hands to one thing or another. You're all on an impact journey. So as a result, you all share with me an innate sense of the impact of impact investing. Any one of you could give this speech. What we want to do is collectively think about this journey, what it means for us and what it means for the world and everybody in between. For 20 years, honestly, I've wanted to give a speech about the impact of impact investing, and I'm very, very grateful to Prabhav for having invited me. Now, why did they invite me? I have to ask that. Is it because Developing World Markets, DWM, got started in impact in the 1990s, and we've been doing this for a long time? Or is it because I have white hair? I'm a little afraid it's the latter. It's because of the white hair. I'm going to suggest we do this old school. When I started my career, PowerPoint wasn't a thing. Some of the younger people might be astonished to know that. So let's just do this as a conversation today. No slides, no data. I just want to share some thoughts and feel the vibe from your thinking. Like many startups, DWM got started in a garage. Like many startups, we grew very quickly and grew out of that garage. That was my garage. During that time in the 1990s, I was on the board of the then young, microfinance network focused solely on women in Latin America called ProMujer. Today it's quite large with 400,000 client women. In India terms, that's not large. In Latin America terms, that is large. It was following in the footsteps of Muhammad Yunus. They were sending people to Bangladesh to get guidance. It was a formative period. The learnings from that enabled DWM to make a mental transition for how to go from what is still today at ProMujer, a nonprofit approach, to one that understands the role of investment in impact. So 20 years ago, we ended up working on what became what I believe is the first blended finance facility, the blended finance investment vehicle in impact for institutional investors. We closed it 20 years ago this year. It hit with a bit of a bang. It got attention. We were excited. We knew we had something new, but we knew it needed a name, and we didn't know what to call this. We came up with socially positive investing. Yeah, that's kind of lame. So that name didn't stick. I don't know who invented the word impact investing. I'd like to meet them. If it's anybody in this room, please raise your hand. I want to go say thank you. So how do I see the impact of impact investing? I think the first and most obvious way is by looking at the beneficiaries. I think each of us in our own impact investment activities should be looking at and counting the beneficiaries. At DWM, a snapshot of who our beneficiaries are today in 2024, there are 25,100,000 clients of the financial institutions and companies that we finance today in India and across 40 emerging and frontier market countries. We're not responsible for all 25 million. On an investment-weighted basis, where we look to see how much our investment has contributed, we think that's about 513,000, 500,000 people. But we're not counting the family members. If it's a man who owns a company with 10 employees, an SME, we're not counting the man's wife or his children. We're not counting the employees' spouses and their families. We're not counting the number of people in the community who sell goods and services to these people who have jobs or who have micro enterprises. I don't know how to do that broader counting, but we should be aware that there is a broad circle of impact well beyond the number of people we can count. That's part of how we are changing the world. It's something we can all be proud of, and I'd like to see us all get better at counting that. A broader definition of the impact is the way impact investing has changed the way people think about investing. Wall Street is watching us. The City of London is watching us. The finance houses in Bombay are watching us. They are sometimes jealous of what we've got. When I go home at night and talk to my family about what I do, I know how that conversation differs from the way it was back when I was a rapacious banker on Wall Street. Okay, don't quote me. I hope I wasn't rapacious. But I was an investment banker on Wall Street, and my family didn't get it. They weren't that proud of me. Today, it's a different conversation. I know that's something you can all appreciate in your own lives. There are virtuous linkages as well that represent huge impact. Those 25 million people, just to take DWM's own numbers for a minute, 25 million beneficiaries, they are funded by whom? Through our funds, yes, that we manage. The money for those funds comes from various pension funds and insurance companies over here on my left side. This is Europe, this is America, this is Japan, where the money is coming from. Those institutional investors have their stakeholders. Stakeholders number in the millions. I don't know how many there are, but it is literally millions. And those millions have entrusted those pension funds with their financial future, and some tiny portion of that money is channeling through us over here to 25 million people. These 25 million don't know these many millions over here. I'm sure they don't. They don't know who we are either. But some of these many millions over here do actually understand something about the 25 million here. Why? Because we've told them. We provide impact reporting and measurement and reporting. We are pretty good at getting the story out. The institutional investors in our funds, some of them also are good at giving that story to their stakeholders. And when they do, and sometimes it's gone even further, we've invited some of these people to come here to India and to Africa and other places to join us, to see us on our journey, to see some of the 25 million people who are impacted directly and their families. When they do, it's life-changing. It changes their outlook forever. They never go back. And sometimes they then invest more with us. We like that kind of impact. Another impact of impact investing that I think is different than Wall Street is where you can set a targeted goal. You can say to yourself, we want to save 1 million people from the downside of having smoke from kerosene lamps lighting their homes. That's what DWM set out to do in 2016. We set a goal of 1 million people to have their homes electrified through solar home systems in Africa and even places here in India where the electric mains are never going to reach. We financed a bunch of off-grid solar operators and others. This is again 2016. This was pretty cutting edge at the time. In total, they managed to electrify something like 200,000 homes times 5 people, let's say. We hit our goal of 1 million. Sitting here in this conference, I've met so many of you who have various very specific impact goals that you're setting out to achieve. This is something we can do in impact investing. It's much harder to do that on Wall Street. The concept just doesn't work the same way. This is a way that we are changing the world. Right now, DWM is moving to create a blended finance facility that focuses on climate and gender, the nexus of climate and gender. This is yet one more area where you set goals. You end up working with your various stakeholders to try and set both the impact parameters and the financial parameters. And pretty soon, you've got a whole team. You've got a family of interrelated parties, from investors at various levels, through service providers, through investees, ultimately to beneficiaries. That ecosystem, that sense of community in the work that we do doesn't exist in Wall Street. Again, we are changing the world. The scope of what we do is changing as well. 20 years ago, microfinance was sort of the only thing people had heard of in impact, for the most part. Today, our investors are bored with microfinance. They like boring because it's not volatile, it's very steady, it's predictable. But they push us to do more. And of course, we do broadly around a range of inclusive finance, and then, as I said, work outside of the financial institutions directly into impact themes. And most of you in this room are working directly in various impact themes. But this broadening is part of the evolution of impact investing, and it is, again, changing the world, because Wall Street picks up on parts of this. Wall Street features it. Take a look at the advertisements that you see sometimes for some of the world's largest financial institutions. They're not showing dollar signs or rupee signs or pound sterling or euro signs. They're showing pictures, well, I'm afraid they're showing pictures like DWM does, except we mean it. Let's talk about scale again for a moment. I mentioned DWM's 25 million beneficiaries, if you will, when we count broadly. You each can do your counting. The GIN, the Global Impact Investment Network, said in 2019 that there were $500 billion invested in impact strategies. 3 years later, their number, by their count, went up to $1.2 trillion. Obviously, huge growth. It's a number big enough to get the attention of Wall Street. There is change there, but it's still a tiny number compared to the need. The Sustainable Development Goals, by some measure, need annual investment of $4 trillion. I didn't make that number up. I don't know where it comes from, but I've seen it. Obviously, that's never going to happen. Obviously, the goals in the Sustainable Development Goals will never fully be met. There will always be poverty and hunger, I'm sorry to say. There will be less of it, thankfully, because of the work that we all do. The only good thing to come from that, I think, sobering statement that I'm making, that there will always be these goals that have to be met, is that none of us have to worry about our jobs. We are in a career that is only going one direction. There is always work to be done, and the needs will never be met. There will be a need for more creativity. There will be a need for growth. There will be a need for more hard work, and all of us can do that. But we're on a journey that is well chosen. I'm optimistic for every one of us in this room, including myself and DWM. That excitement around impact investing has not been lost on mainstream asset managers. I'm sure we've all seen the trend that some of the world's largest asset managers have started to label large areas of their investment universe as impact. Okay, they paint some of their assets in impact colors. Is this dilutive labeling? Is this dumbing down? Or is this progress? Is this true change? I don't want to answer that. Sincere people can debate that. I'll let you decide. But it does represent an impact that all of us in this room are having. It's astonishing how each of us, who generally speaking, I think it's fair to say, work for relatively small institutions, whether we are GPs or LPs. For the most part, these are smaller groups here. And yet we are having an influence on some of the world's biggest asset managers and financial institutions. That's something. That's really something to note and to be proud of. We are also contributing tools to some of those largest financial institutions and asset managers. The whole concept of blended finance is providing opportunities for some of the normal investors, mainstream investors, to come into impact vehicles, well protected in the senior with layers of mezzanine and junior ahead of them, for sure, but it is drawing the mainstream into impact. These concepts came from impact investing. We can all be proud of that. The idea of outcomes-based financing, the idea that for GPs in the private equity business who are getting performance fees, that some of those fees should be conditioned upon impact goals. This looks weird on Wall Street. Some of these incentives look upside down to people on Wall Street, but they work, and they are changing the way Wall Street thinks. Again, something we should be aware of and be proud of. I think what I'm trying to paint here is a picture of a pond where, in the classic example, you throw in a pebble and you see a wave. Well, that's what each of us are involved in. We can see that immediate wave. But of course, the wave expands and it gets bigger, and there are subsidiary waves. And as it expands across the entire pond is influenced to some degree. And we might not even be able to see the entire scope of that influence. But it's there, and we're all contributing to it, and it's something we should all go home tonight after this conference and share with our families as something we can be proud of. The final impact I want to talk about is indeed close to home. For every one of us, we have the opportunity to be part of this ecosystem. Well, it's not just an ecosystem, it's a career. 20 years ago, this career choice barely existed. I honestly counted myself fortunate 20 years ago to have found a way to work in a place, in a way where I could use some creativity, do some good in the world, and go home and be proud of it. People now, young people who are coming up who are ambitious, smart, talented, skilled in finance, they do not have to go to Wall Street. They can if they want to, that's fine. They can go to the finance houses in Mumbai or the City of London or wherever, that's fine. But they also have a choice to work in impact and to have their impact, their wide ripples across the entire pond where we are influencing the world. One of those people is my own colleague, Aditya Kumar here, yes? Aditya, stand up, just so we have a chance to make sure that we have a chance to meet everybody in this room. Aditya and I are, both of us, very proud, and the entire team of DWM is very proud to be in this space, and we thank Prabhav for inviting us. Aditya will be speaking on a panel later today. Right now, either Aditya or I, we are so happy to take any questions, comments, or simply to mingle with you afterwards. Thank you very much.